Imagine you have to look your 9-year-old child right in the eyes and explain to them why the world treats you both like animals.
Yeah, and you can't sugarcoat it either.
Right, you cannot lie to them. Because in your reality, a lie isn't going to protect them. It's actually just going to leave them vulnerable.
It's an incredibly heavy premise, but it really forces us to look at history not as like a collection of dates or treaties, but as a visceral psychological battleground.
Exactly. And that devastating scenario is the reality at the heart of today's deep dive. We are exploring a profoundly powerful excerpt from Glen Carty's novel, The Secret Pact.
Specifically, we're diving into this three-part prequel arc called A Mother's Legacy.
Yeah, and our mission today is to navigate the factual, harrowing content of this text. It's a mother recounting the raw story of her capture in Africa, the Middle Passage, and her enslavement, all to her young son, Silas.
But we aren't just, walking through a timeline here. We are looking at how this mother actively weaponizes her own memory.
Weaponizes it, yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Right. We're unpacking how a narrative of just unimaginable trauma is actually used as a tool for survival and identity preservation against a system that was designed to erase human beings.
So, to start, the author drops us directly into the stakes of this transmission. The atmosphere of the scene is just palpable.
It really grounds everything that follows.
Oh, totally. The scene opens in a slave cabin on a St. Catherine plantation in Jamaica. It's dusk. The oppressive heat of the day is still just hanging in the air.
You can almost feel it.
Yeah, and you can hear the faint rhythmic chirping of Jamaican crickets outside, the scraping of cane leaves in the breeze, the exhausted shouts of men finishing their labor.
And inside this dark, suffocating space, the mother is sitting with a basin between her knees, washing a shirt.
Right, she's just rubbing the coarse cloth against itself in these slow, hard movements.
Yeah.
And Silas, her 9-year-old son, asks a question that basically shatters the quiet of the room.
He asks, "Why did they take you?"
Wow. I mean, it is the ultimate question, right?
It really is. It's the question of cause and effect.
Yeah.
As human beings, we're kind of desperately wired to seek reasons for our suffering.
Oh, for sure. We want to believe in a universe where bad things happen because, I don't know, a rule was broken or a mistake was made.
Exactly. Silas is looking for that logic.
Okay, let's unpack this, because her answer completely dismantles that human desire for logic.
She just stops washing.
Yeah, her hands go still in the water, and she tells him bluntly, because I was there.
It is a chillingly brilliant piece of writing. I mean, it strips away any illusion of cosmic justice or karma or punishment.
She elaborates on this for him, too.
Mm.
She explains that she wasn't taken because she committed a crime. Nobody came asking her name or judging her for stealing or breaking a local law.
Right. She was taken simply because she was capable of breathing. She was capable of working.
And she just happened to be alive in a place where human greed could physically reach her.
Which introduces the central theme of the mother's lesson. She's preparing Silas to understand the system of commodification. To survive the plantation, he has to understand that the violence inflicted upon them isn't personal. And it isn't a judgment on their character or their soul.
It's just purely mechanical.
Exactly. It's an industry.
And we see the mechanics of that commodification start in the very first memory she shares. She contrasts the sudden violence of her capture with the completely mundane, ordinary joy of her life before it.
Yeah, she tells Silas about being at a river in her homeland with her older sister.
The cool water, the smooth brown stones under her feet. Her sisters talking too much, complaining about their chores, laughing a little too loud.
And the mother tells Silas that their life wasn't soft. Like there was always hard work, always the threat of hunger nearby.
But the crucial defining detail is that this life was theirs.
Ownership of one's reality. The path to the river belonged to their routine. The sisters' laugh belonged to their family. They had agency over their struggles.
And then, as she bends down to rinse her face in the water, the world just breaks. But it doesn't break with thunder or drums or like a massive cinematic struggle.
It's so quiet.
Yeah. It breaks with a heavy footstep in the mud behind her. A hand comes over her mouth, smelling of stale sweat and metal. She tastes blood from her own lip being pressed against her teeth.
And the detail she focuses on, the one she really makes sure Silas understands, is that the man holding her was perfectly, terrifyingly calm.
Right. When Silas asks why the man wasn't panicked or rushing, she answers, because he'd done it before.
That phrase just captures the absolute banality of evil.
Wow. Yeah.
To the mother, the universe is collapsing. Her entire existence, her future, her family, It is all being obliterated in a matter of seconds.
But to the captor, it's just another Tuesday.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
practiced, routine data entry. He's simply collecting inventory.
Which leads to the moment they place the iron collar around her neck.
Yeah.
There's a tiny metallic sound it makes, a click.
Just a click.
And we often think of this moment merely as the physical start of captivity. But she explains it to Silas as a complete reclassification of her existence.
Right.
In a fraction of a second, a sound thinner than a snapping twig transforms a daughter, a sister, a human being into cargo. So what does this all mean for how she frames her identity to her son?
Well, what's fascinating here is how she actively rejects that reclassification. She uses the memory of that specific sound, that iron clicking shut, to deliver the first foundational lesson to her son.
The text says she physically reaches out, grabs Silas's wrist with her wet hand, and tells him, "Never confuse what men call you with what you are."
Such a profound distinction. The captors are attempting to overwrite her humanity with a price tag.
Yeah, they're trying to dictate that her existence basically begins on their ledger.
Exactly the point she is refuting. She grips his wrist to ground him in the physical reality of his own body, insisting that he must know where he comes from.
Because origin is the one thing the men with the ropes and the ledgers cannot touch.
Right. They can chain the physical body, they can rename it, they can sell it, but they cannot reach into the past and erase the river.
To explore how the captors actively try to erase that internal reality, we have to look at the forced march to the coast. The narrative shifts from the disruption of her ordinary life into what is essentially a masterclass in the architecture of psychological terror.
The march wasn't just about moving bodies across geographical space. It was a highly calculated process of psychological conditioning.
She narrates this brutal journey where the captives are tied in a line, and she describes a moment where a man near the back breaks his bindings and runs for the trees.
He almost makes it to the cover of the brush, too.
He does, but the captors shoot him, drag him back to the line by his ankles, and beat him savagely in front of everyone.
But the mother points out a horrifying nuance to Silas here.
Yeah, she tells him they didn't beat the man because he could still run. His legs were already ruined by the gunshot. They beat him to build what she calls a fence.
A psychological fence. By making the punishment so spectacular and disproportionate, they're constructing a barrier inside the minds of the people watching.
She tells Silas, that terror can be made into a fence around your thoughts, around the party that says, run.
They're literally training the captives to police their own desire for freedom.
And the physical toll of this conditioning is just unimaginable. Blistered feet, raw skin, chafed to the bone by ropes, paralyzing thirst.
And then when they finally reach the coastal holding pens, the captors throw buckets of seawater over them.
Not to cool them down, though. Not to offer relief.
No, they wash the dirt off their bodies to make their skin look polished and presentable for the European buyers, while deliberately ignoring the fact that these people are dying of internal dehydration.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the commodification we discussed earlier. They are curating the product.
A shiny exterior suggests a valuable piece of property, right? And the internal suffering of the human being is entirely irrelevant to the transaction.
Have you ever had a moment where a single piece of paper, like a credit score, a resume, or a medical chart, failed to capture who you actually are?
We all have, yeah.
Now magnify that feeling to the absolute extreme. That is what the captives are experiencing. But in the dark, tied to trees outside those coastal pens, they begin to fight back.
And the method of their resistance is just incredible.
It's pitch black. They are stripped of their clothes, their homes, their families, yet they start passing whispers down the line. They're whispering their true names to each other in the dark.
A seemingly small action, but the mother frames it as a massive act of defiance.
I really want to focus on that. Here's where it gets really interesting. Why does she specifically tell Silas that trading names was a small refusal?
Think of her memory and those whispered names, like a psychological blockchain.
Oh, wow. I like that.
Yeah, the captors have their centralized physical ledger, the paper and ink, where these people are listed merely as quantities and prices.
Right.
But by whispering a name, a captive is saying, I was here before you. I belonged to people before you counted me. I had a mother before you priced me.
They're creating a decentralized, incorruptible record of their humanity in the minds of strangers.
Exactly. They couldn't break the physical chains on their wrists, but that whisper was proof that the internal self was still intact and completely out of the captor's reach.
And the agony of trying to maintain that internal self is brought into sharp relief at those coastal pens. There's this heart-wrenching scene where she hears her childhood name being called out.
It's so tough to read.
She turns and sees her sister through a wooden fence across the yard. Her sister is battered, her mouth is swollen, but it's her. They push toward the barrier,
Her sister reaches a hand through the slats of the wood.
and the mother reaches back. They are so close, she can see the dried mud packed under her sister's fingernails.
And just as they're about to touch, the system intervenes.
A guard simply walks over and pulls the sister away. There's no anger in it, no dramatic speech. He just yanks her backward because she isn't standing where the inventory is supposed to be,
And the mother is dragged in the opposite direction toward the boats.
leaving her with the eternal open wound of never knowing if her sister lived or died on that coast.
The author articulates the cruelty of that moment so brilliantly, saying, death is not the only way they take someone from you. A person can grieve 100 endings when she is denied the truth.
Denying closure is just another mechanism of control. It keeps the mind fractured.
It absolutely does.
Before we move from the coastal pens into the horrors of the Middle Passage, I kind of had to play devil's advocate here.
Sure, go for it.
As a modern reader, my instinct is to look at this mother and wonder if she's making a catastrophic mistake.
How so?
Well, she is actively downloading this graphic, unfiltered trauma into the brain of a 9-year-old boy. Isn't there an argument that burdening him with the agonizing details of the march, the beatings, and the loss of her sister might break him psychologically before the plantation overseers even get the chance?
Right.
Like, why not protect his innocence for as long as possible?
That is exactly what our contemporary parenting instincts scream at us to do. We want to shield children from the darkness of the world. But the mother's reality operates on a completely different paradigm.
Right. Innocence isn't safe for him.
In her world, innocence is not a sanctuary. It is a deadly liability. If Silas grows up believing the reality the plantation presents to him, that he is subhuman, that his suffering is natural, that he is nothing more than a tool for harvesting cane, he will be consumed from the inside out.
So, this story isn't just a recounting of the past, it's an inoculation.
Precisely. She is introducing a controlled dose of the horror of the world into his mind so that his psychological immune system can build defenses against the brainwashing of the slave system.
Right. Ignorance of how the machinery of slavery works will get him killed, or worse, make him complicit in his own spiritual destruction.
Which makes her narration of the ship itself so vital. She transitions from the physical violence of the land to the existential void of the Middle Passage.
She tells Silas, the first thing the ship took was the sky.
What a line.
It really is. She describes being driven down into the hatch, into a darkness that felt so thick it felt alive. It is a complete, deliberate sensory deprivation designed to erase the human hard drive.
The heat, the smell of rot and sickness, bodies packed so tightly against each other that you couldn't even claim the space required to expand your own ribs to breathe.
And beneath it all, the constant, terrifying, rhythmic groaning of the ship's wood.
The architecture of the ship is the ultimate test of the internal identity she's been desperately trying to hold on to. It is an environment engineered to strip away the last remaining pieces of the self, reducing a person to a pure biological struggle for oxygen.
She actually admits to Silas that the ship almost won. There were stretches in the dark where she actively wanted to leave herself.
She describes wanting to go quiet, not just falling asleep, but a dissociative state where the mind permanently evacuates the body to escape the unbearable present.
But she is tethered back to reality by an older woman chained beside her. This woman, who is enduring the exact same suffocating torment, keeps reaching over, tapping the mother's arm in the pitch black.
And forcing her to speak her own name out loud.
It acts as an anchor. In a void designed to make you forget you exist as an individual, that physical tap and the sound of her own voice are lifelines.
And she repays that profound act of human connection, too. Later in the crossing, a woman dies pressed against her side.
And the guards don't come down to clear the dead for hours. Lying there with the body, the mother realizes she doesn't know the dead woman's name.
So she decides to give the anonymous body one of the names she heard whispered back on the road in Africa.
She does it so this woman wouldn't be thrown into the Atlantic Ocean as nothing. The mother tells Silas that in the belly of the ship, she became a small house for the dead.
She transformed her own memory into a sanctuary to keep those people existing.
It is a staggering burden to take on, especially when your own survival is in question. But she tells her son, better heavy than empty.
An empty mind is easily filled by the definitions of the captors.
Wow. And despite the ship's design to reduce them to animals, There is this incredible moment of spontaneous resistance during a terrifying squall.
The storm scene.
Yeah, the ship is violently pitching. People are screaming in panic in the dark. The wooden hull sounds like it's splintering apart. But then, a single woman's voice cuts through the chaos.
She starts singing, not a grand, triumphant anthem, just a broken, half-remembered tune from home.
And then the woman next to her joins in, and another. And soon, a chorus of voices is rising above the storm, proving that the European captors entirely failed to extinguish their humanity.
They engineered an environment of pure desperation and sickness, but they couldn't empty the captives of their culture or their capacity for communal defiance.
But the mother is very careful about how she frames this survival to Silas. We are deeply conditioned to view survival as a clean triumph, you know?
Oh, absolutely. We love the classic hero's journey where the protagonist overcomes impossible odds through sheer willpower, superior virtue, and unyielding strength.
But the mother actively warns Silas not to fall into that trap. She
Yeah.
tells him, do not make survival too clean. Survival is not always mercy. How does this specific text challenge our standard, comfortable narratives about surviving trauma?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the mother is completely dismantling the myth of meritocracy and survival.
Right.
She refuses to let Silas believe that surviving the crossing meant she was somehow stronger, braver, or more deserving of life than the people who died chained next to her. Survival in the belly of that ship was terrifyingly arbitrary.
It was purely luck of the draw. Who caught a fever, who was denied water, who was crushed.
Exactly. To frame her survival as a moral triumph implies a dark corollary that those who perished somehow failed or weren't strong enough.
Which is awful.
Right, and she fundamentally rejects that logic. She refuses to let the cruelty of the system dictate the value of the lives lost.
The true victory, the actual triumph she's passing on to her son, wasn't merely the biological fact that her lungs kept processing air.
The victory was that she, in her own words, took the ship inside her and still emerged on the other side carrying the memory of the river, her sister's laugh, that one defiant line of a song from the storm, and the names of the dead.
She survived with her internal record intact. That is the true rebellion.
And she carries that internal rebellion right to the end of the crossing, which brings us to the brutal reality of their arrival in Jamaica.
We see very quickly that the nightmare absolutely does not stop at the shoreline. She describes standing on the deck, her eyes burning from the sudden sunlight, seeing the lush green mountains of the island rising from the sea.
But she tells Silas the beauty of the landscape felt like a cruel insult. The land was vibrant and alive, but it didn't know her. She felt entirely wrong upon it.
The realization she has when they are finally taken off the ship is devastating. She specifically uses the word unloaded, like barrels of flour or molasses.
Standing on the docks, she understands that the ship was only the transit mechanism. The chain simply continued onto the land.
We are right back to the ledger we talked about at the beginning. Men in clean coats, making marks on paper, checking her teeth, feeling her muscles, completely and intentionally blind to the human being standing in front of them.
And there's this incredibly tense moment where an older enslaved woman carrying a heavy basket walks past her on the shore.
Without making eye contact, the older woman gives her first real lesson in the mechanics of Jamaica. She whispers, "Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open."
It's not a welcoming greeting. It is an entire survival manual distilled into 9 words.
Observe the power dynamics, understand the threats, and do not draw attention to yourself until you know how to navigate the violence.
Right. And as the story reaches its conclusion for the night in the dark cabin, Silas asks the final, desperate question.
It's the question you can feel he's been holding on to the entire time she's been speaking. He looks at his mother and asks, "Did you think you would ever be free?"
And her answer is just a flat, unapologetic no.
Which is jarring. We are so accustomed to big cinematic moments of liberation in our historical narratives. The protagonist looks at the horizon, the music swells, the chains metaphorically or literally fall.
But this narrative paints freedom not as a grand event, but as a microscopic seed.
So how does the mother explain this incredibly complex concept of freedom to a 9-year-old?
Well, this raises an important question about what freedom actually is at its core when all physical autonomy has been stripped away. She breaks down her final, most important lesson for him.
Right.
She explains that freedom does not always begin as a concrete belief in a better future. When you are standing on strange ground, locked in iron collars, thousands of miles from everyone you have ever loved, you don't magically possess the belief that you will one day walk away.
Freedom doesn't start with hope.
No. It begins as a hidden name whispered in the dark. It begins as a half-remembered song sung during a hurricane. It begins as a woman standing on an auction block, refusing, purely inside the fortress of her own mind, to belong to the men exchanging coins for her body.
The internal refusal. The psychological sanctuary the ledger cannot reach.
Yes, she tells Silas that sometimes a small thing lives long enough to become a fire.
By recounting this harrowing journey, she is handing him the factual, unvarnished memory of who she was, the river, the sister, the humanity she violently maintained on the ship.
She is doing this so that no matter what the plantation does to his body, it can never ever convince his mind that he was merely born for Cain.
She is giving him the spark that will eventually fuel that fire.
It is an incredibly powerful narrative strategy.
Just to step back and summarize the sheer emotional and psychological weight of the journey we just unpacked. We started in the suffocating heat of that St. Catherine plantation hut.
Through the raw power of a mother's voice, we felt the cool stones of an African river. We felt the heavy, practiced footstep of the captor in the mud.
We examined the architecture of terror on that dusty road to the coast. We descended into the sensory void of the ship's belly, and we finally stood on the cruel, beautiful, ledger-driven shores of Jamaica.
And the reason this deep dive into Glen Carty's text matters so profoundly is that it illustrates how history is never an abstract concept. It isn't the dry ink on the colonial ledgers.
True history is carried in the quiet, unbreakable resilience of human memory.
It is passed from a mother to a son in the dark, serving as an inoculation against erasure, ensuring that the truth of their humanity outlives the terror of their circumstances.
It is the ultimate act of defiance, which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive into the text.
What's that?
Think about the unrecorded history that you carry in your own life. If the ultimate rebellion against being overwritten by the systems of the world is simply remembering exactly who you are, what small, quiet memories are you preserving right now to pass on as a spark to the next generation?
A question that demands an answer.
Keep digging deep. We'll see you next time.